When we talk about exploitation at work, we usually think of it as a social problem, right? An economic issue. But what if it's something more, something you can actually feel, that gets stored in your body? In this explainer, we're going to go way beyond theory and explore how these big systemic failures can leave a very real, very tangible biological scar.
All right, so here's our roadmap. We're going to start at the highest level, with a societal problem that's basically invisible. Then, we'll trace it back to where it often begins, the classroom. From there, we'll zoom all the way in, right into the human brain, to see what happens under pressure. Then, we'll see how all that stress becomes physical. And finally, we'll look at a possible path forward for rewiring the whole system.
So first things first, we need to wrap our heads around a type of exploitation that's so subtle it often flies completely under the radar. It's a problem that, a lot of the time, doesn't even have a name.
And this, right here, gets to the absolute heart of it all. For people who are neurodivergent, being pushed to the margins isn't just a bad feeling or some psychological slight. It is a physical, embodied reality, a corporeal fact. It's real.
Okay, so a perfect example of this comes from the Netherlands. They have a term for it, the no-name problem. It describes exactly this situation, where neurodivergent workers are left totally vulnerable and unprotected. To really see what this looks like, let's dive into the story of an individual named Dennis Verhash.
For Dennis, this wasn't some abstract theory. This was his life. He had this incredible opportunity to study applied psychology, a real path to a career. But that door was slammed shut. Why? Because his employer simply failed to do what they were legally required to do to support him.
And what's so powerful here is how this just lays out the mechanics of that failure, step by step. There was a program. There was a clear requirement for an internship. And there was a legal duty on the employer. In Dutch law, it's called inspanningsverplichtingen, to provide guidance. And then, step 4, failure. They just didn't do it. This isn't just some paperwork mix-up. This is a systemic breakdown that literally stopped a person's life from moving forward.
Now, you might be asking, where does this kind of vulnerability even start? Well, it doesn't just pop up out of nowhere in the workplace. The seeds are often planted years, even decades earlier, right in the classroom.
It can happen through this really destructive process called educational gaslighting. It's what happens when a student's neurodivergent brain, which might desperately need visual ways of learning, is misunderstood, ignored, or just flat out invalidated. The source material calls the result a visual exposure deficit.
And this just perfectly illustrates that mismatch. On one side, you have how we typically teach something like math, all abstract symbols, all formulas. For a visual thinker, that's like trying to read a foreign language. But on the other side, you have a much more inclusive approach that actually connects those symbols to real visual things. The problem? That second, more effective method is way less common. It's a systemic disadvantage baked right in.
Okay, so we've gone from the system to the classroom. Now we're going to zoom in even further. Let's get right down to the cellular level and see what's physically happening inside the brain of a three-dimensional thinker who's under this kind of constant, intense pressure.
We have to be clear, this isn't just about different learning styles. We are talking about the brain being literally wired in a different way. There are even specific genetic variants, like one called KIA0319, that can affect the neural circuits that control everything from how your eyes move when you read to how you process the space around you. It creates a completely unique cognitive architecture. So you have this uniquely wired brain, and then the world puts it under an unbelievable amount of stress. The research calls these sustained, overwhelming stressors juggernauts. And the best way to get a feel for what that's like? Just imagine trying to juggle 16 balls, all at the same time.
And look what those balls are. It's not just work and family. It's also processing normal vision, plus distorted vision from dyslexia, plus trying to regulate your own emotions, plus social expectations, and on and on. It is a crushing cognitive load. And you can see how a deficit in just one area, like vision, doesn't just add one more ball. It makes juggling all the others exponentially harder.
And this is the moment where it all comes crashing down. This is where we see exactly how all those layers of pressure, society, educational, cognitive, stop being ideas and become a physical, painful reality in the human body.
So it starts back in the classroom, that constant invalidation, that constant struggle for the right kind of input. It's not a one-time thing. It creates a state of chronic, relentless psychological stress that just never lets up.
But that stress isn't just in your head. Your body has to react. The autonomic nervous system goes into overdrive. And the source material is incredibly specific about how this shows up, as physical muscular tension, right above the eyes and around the temples.
That tension then begins to cascade down the body, and it overloads this critical spot in the upper back, a nexus of muscle, spine, and nerves they call the trapezius gray. Think of this diamond-shaped area as becoming a storage locker for all that cognitive and emotional stress. It creates a painful physical feedback loop.
A single, specific event in Dennis's life shows just how fragile this overloaded system becomes. He'd recently had surgery, which made his body even more vulnerable. Then, a sudden sound, that's all it was, but in his heightened state, it caused a startle effect so severe it was like a whiplash trauma. The impact damaged deep brainstem structures, the parts that handle things like attention and memory. An already stressed system was just pushed completely over the edge. That is the biological scar.
So, wow. If the problem is that deeply integrated, if it spans society, education, psychology, and literally our own biology, then what could a solution possibly look like? It can't be a simple fix. It has to be about rewiring the entire system, from the inside out. Well, the path forward that's proposed here is this really fascinating three-part process. You start with applied psychology to scientifically diagnose and begin healing the trauma. Then you bring in applied philosophy to build the mental frameworks needed to integrate and master your own mind. And all of that culminates in a final powerful step to recalibrate the brain and body together.
And that final step is called prismatic cognition. Honestly, the best way to think of it is as a form of applied biology. It's a framework that lets a 3D visual thinker use their own self-awareness to consciously tap into the brain's natural ability to change itself, its neuroplasticity. It's a method for taking back control of the system, healing the damage, and turning all that adversity into a genuine source of strength.
This whole journey, from a systemic failure all the way down to a physical wound, leaves us with one last massive question. If exploitation isn't just an idea, but a literal biological scar etched into a person's body, then what does a true cure even look like? It suggests that the answer can't just be about policy or just about therapy. The healing has to be as deep and as integrated as the harm itself.